All right. Good morning. Happy Friday. Thank you for being back here in chapel with us. It's good to have you all here. I wanted to give a few announcements before we officially start chapel this morning. I want to give you a heads up of some things that are coming up, specifically with chapel. Just make sure we're all on the same page. So after today, just a reminder that you have 3 weeks left to get in your chapel credits. So three weeks to get in chapel credits after today. So make sure that you're keeping an eye on how many you need, both in person and virtual for the school year. So as a reminder, you need 9 in-person chapel credits. Okay, 9 in-person chapel credits. So just make note of that. 3 weeks left. Next week, we'll have student seminars. So we won't meet here centrally next week for chapel any of the normal days. We won't meet here in the MOCC like this. We'll have some of your peers, some of your friends teaching in classrooms across the entire campus. You'll be able to check the lowdown, especially on Monday. Check the lowdown for a spreadsheet listing who's speaking, what topic they're speaking on, even a brief description of that topic, and then what room they're going to be in so you can make your selection for next week. There'll be tabs at the bottom of the spreadsheet for each day, for Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, and the days switch. So if you're going to go multiple days, just make sure you check that. Click on the different tabs and check that. So next week, student seminars, and those, again, all count for in-person chapel credit. So next week, please make note of that. In 2 weeks, on Tuesday, April 27th, we'll have our day of worship. We didn't do this in the fall. We postponed, so we're doing it. We're bringing it back this spring. So remember that is worth 3 in-person credits. So of the 9, 3 of them you can get at day of worship. We really want to incentivize you being here. For you first-year students who may not have experienced this yet, day of worship is a day where we don't have day classes. We cancel day classes, have an opportunity to have a chapel service here together. And then Communitas will happen in the afternoon with different events going on across the entire campus. So make note of that. One note that I want to make for day of worship is we're going to offer 2 different service times that day in order to have the proper distancing for all of you as you're here. There'll be one that starts around 9, okay, and then one that starts a little bit closer to 10:30. So we need to divide up the student body in order to use this space with the correct spacing for all of you. So just make note of that. There'll be 2 options there. We'll do the same service back to back, but again, that's worth 3 in-person credits for you. So really want to incentivize you being here that morning. And then on Tuesday, May 4th, we're going to try to do something we've done in the past called Original Songs Chapel. So if you have a song that you've written on your own there, we want you to submit a video of you performing it or the lyrics to it to music@grace.edu. Again, you can submit that to music@grace.edu, and we'd love to have a chapel on Tuesday, May 4th, where we celebrate those songs, worship together through them, and we'd love to see a bunch of different genres of music. We would love to see not just one, but multiple genres be reflected there. So if you're interested in that, please, sooner rather than later, email music@grace.edu and let them know you're interested, and we'll go from there. So again, 3 weeks to go, student seminars next week, day of worship coming up in 2 weeks, and then Original Songs Chapel is on May 4th, and you can contact music@grace.edu. All right, I'm going to invite Avery Rooley to come on up and introduce our chapel speaker.
Hey Grace, my name is Avery Rooley. I'm the ARD of Indy and Beta dorms, and I have the honor and privilege to introduce our chapel speaker today. She is my roommate, so this is super fun for me. Yeah, it's crazy to think that I've really only known her for less than a year. We met when we moved into our apartment together where we would be roommates for the next 2 years. Since then, we've navigated a lot from what it looks like to be in residence life in a mid-pandemic, and even to what it looks like to turn off the smoke alarm before it sets off the whole building and we have to evacuate. In my learning of Maia, there's a consistent theme. She's passionate and committed. I knew it from the beginning when I saw her mug collection, her love for Harry Potter Legos, and her passion for Disney. But this passion extends to a powerful depth that makes me overjoyed to get to introduce you her today. Maia Bowen is passionate about people, about justice, about social change, and you get the privilege of listening in with her today. So please help me welcome Maia Bowen.
Hello everyone. How are you guys today? Oh, that was horrible. Try again. How are you guys today? Okay, that's a little bit better. Like Avery said, my name is Maia Bowen, and I am the ARD of Lodge and Omega. Are there any Lodge or Omega people here today? Yes! Oh my goodness. So a couple more things about me is that I just turned 23 a couple months ago. So I think that's just like a huge milestone because, man, I'm 23. I'm not really like a kid anymore. Not really an adult quite yet, but I'm 23. Some other things that are cool about me, I would like to say is, like Avery said, I love Harry Potter. I'm a huge anime fan. And I am a K-pop stan. I'm not quite a part of the army, but I am a low-key Blink, and if you understood any of that, we're now best friends and let's get coffee. And another thing, yes, and another thing is I love horrible dad jokes, so if you have any, like, come find me. That is just a huge thing that I love. So before I get started with my exact message, I have to be like every other chapel speaker that has ever graced the stage and introduce you to my family a little bit. Oh, there we go. That is my wonderful family right there. So I think this is your right side of the screen. My younger brother, Gerald, and then there's me. And then my older sister, Brittany, and of course, next to her is my mom. So she looks a lot like me. So if you see a littler version of me walking around campus, that's my mom, not me. And then right next to my mom is my dad. Love him to death. And then the three little toddlers are Armani, Amari, Alea, and Ariana. Yes, my sister decided to name all of her kids with an A in the same sounding syllables just to make, a moment like this really hard to pronounce all of their names correctly. But something that I love about being an aunt is the fact that they age me every single time I watch them. I have an example for you. So whenever I like to go home, I'm about 3.5 hours from home. I like to babysit them, spend one-on-one time with them. They can't call me aunt yet, so they call me TT. This is very important. So as we wind down for the night, they like to watch a movie before they go to bed. And I was like, okay, yep, we're all gathered in the living room, and they're arguing over what they want to watch. It was between The Incredibles, Cocomelon, and I'm going to say right now, don't introduce them to Cocomelon because it's game over after that. Kids go crazy for Cocomelon, I'm telling you that right now. Or Power Rangers. They continue to argue for a couple minutes, and they land on The Incredibles. I was like, okay, yeah, this is a movie I can watch with them. So I was like, okay, do you want to watch Incredibles 1, or do you want to watch Incredibles 2? They're like, TT, we want to watch Incredibles 1. Duh. I was like, okay, I'll put on Incredibles 1. Put on Incredibles 1. I'd say about 30 seconds pass by before they're like, TT, what is this? I'm like, what do you mean? This is Incredibles 1. And my mom pops her head out of the kitchen, and she's like, Maya, they've probably only seen Incredibles 2. And I was like, hold up. My sister did not fail as a parent to not let her kids know that there are 2 Incredibles, Incredibles 1 and Incredibles 2. So I was like, Maya, just forget about it. Put on Incredibles 2. Lo and behold, I put on Incredibles 2, and they are silent, and I don't hear anything else from them for the rest of the night. And I'm like, look, I'm going to have a serious conversation with my sister about their Disney education. This is really important. But I could talk to you guys all day about a lot of the other things that I have encountered with being an aunt or a TT, but I'm not here to talk to you about that today. Today, I'm here to talk about grief and the journey to healing. And to do that, I have to take you back to 2019. So unlike many other people, 2019 was not my worst year ever. 2020 was not my worst year ever. Don't get me wrong, there were parts of 2020 that absolutely sucked. I didn't get to walk across the stage. I didn't get to have a graduation party with all my friends and family. And that really sucks because I was one of the first generations, along with many of my other family members, my cousins and such, to graduate right after high school. And that was really sucky to me. And it's so funny because I literally graduated college in my Toy Story pajamas and finishing my Dr. Rotz's CCT final. So I finished college in my pajamas, guys. But if I'm completely honest, I was blessed in so many other ways in 2020 that didn't make the year absolutely horrible. The summer of 2019 and a few months before that it was the hardest season of my life that I've had to endure so far. Again, I know I'm only 21, but I'm not going to discredit the hard season that 2019 and a couple months before was. Let me give you a quick rundown really quickly, just so you can get some backstory. I wasn't chosen for a publishing internship that I really thought God wanted me to have. And when I tell you this publishing internship was really good, it was really good. And I'm sure a lot of you guys can relate because in order to graduate, you kind of need those internship credits to, get your degree. So I really needed a publishing internship because that industry in itself is hard. And on top of that, I needed it to graduate. So with that, I didn't get that internship, and I was having a hard time finding another one. Another thing, I was struggling really hard with the fact that I was single, and I had to watch all of my friends either enter a new relationship, get engaged, or get married. While at the same time, I was constantly rejected and told, "I date you, but you're black," or "I can't date you because you're black." Yeah, I'm gonna say that one more time for the people who are on their phones. Some people would not date me simply for the fact that I was black. Like I, or someone else across this campus, could have been the love of your life, but you chose not to pursue something because I had more melanin than you. That's ridiculous, but it's ridiculous how true that is, but if I'm completely honest, that's a message for another day. Anyway, I returned home and I was experiencing some lower back pain, and I was told that I would have to have 2 surgeries back to back to fix it. They weren't too bad, I'm fine now, but between those 2 surgeries, my grandma had a heart attack and she never woke up. My grandma didn't come back, she didn't. My grandma and I were so close that we lived 5 minutes apart. 3 if you speed through all the lights like my mom does on occasion. But yeah, that's how close me and my grandmother were. There were times that I would just go over to her house and just sit and bug her. That was my favorite pastime, was going over to my grandmother's house and just bugging her. She taught me so many lessons and stories that I'll never forget. And let me take a second just to tell you how amazing this woman was, because her birthday is coming up in a couple days. First, she was a woman of God. Throughout all of her pain and suffering, she would continue to shout at church about how good the God is that we serve. She was one of those people who would literally give you the shirt off of her back if she could. And don't let her find out that you don't have somewhere to go for any type of holiday, because she would invite you over to our house and get mad if you didn't come over, with her knowing that you didn't have anywhere else to go. And granted, that didn't really happen too often because my grandmother could cook and bake. At her funeral, I couldn't tell you how many people went up and spoke about her chocolate cake. It's so funny. But at the same time, don't get it twisted. As much as my grandmother was a saint, she also packed a punch. Don't ever say anything off the wall around her, because if you were in striking range, she'd get you. I don't know if anyone has heard or seen Mortal Kombat, but in the last fight where they're like, "Finish him." That's how my grandmother was. So if you were in striking range and you said something that you weren't supposed to be saying around her, she'd look at you above her glasses. That was her finish her move. That was just her. But as soon as she do that, she also put a plate of something in front of you, be like, "Be quiet, sit down, eat this food. I don't want to hear you again for the rest of the night." That's just what my grandmother was. I still love her to death for all of those things. But moving on, despite everything that happened in my family over that summer, I packed up in August and headed back to Grace to finish my senior year. I was so excited, so relieved to be leaving, because it allowed me to believe that coming back to Grace meant that the summer and everything that happened before didn't happen. I wouldn't have to think about it anymore. I wouldn't have to live it anymore. I thought that I was getting a fresh start, but what really happened when I packed up all of my stuff in my 2006 white Mazda, her name was Sylvia, that I would get a fresh start and headed back to Grace, and that my grief and all the troubles that I had would just leave. However, they actually hopped in the car and drove 3.5 hours with me. Over the next few months, a few other things piled up. My cousin was shot and killed in an accident, while his other brother was in critical condition, and my senior volleyball season wasn't going the way that I wanted. For the previous 3 years, I had worked so hard to get a position, and I didn't get it. I was underperforming, and I knew it, so I had lost that position and was given to someone else. As I'm sure some of the athletes in the room, or if you're watching on live, can relate, when you work so hard for something and you don't get it because of something is holding you back, it's hard. It's devastating. I was in a denial so deep that I didn't even accept it until I sat on my couch in Kent and just cried. At that point, I don't think I had cried that hard since my grandmother had passed away. In that crying session, I had cried out to God for the first time in a long time. I asked him to take away all this pain, hurt, and the ability to carry it away. I no longer wanted it. I could no longer handle it. I didn't want to address the fact that I was lonely or the fact that I wasn't performing well because I was still recovering from a surgery and I had gained some weight. And lastly, I didn't want to address the fact that I was struggling, period. But in that moment, I don't think I had ever heard God speak to me so clearly. He told me, and I will never forget these words, I can't do that because it makes you who you are and who I want you to be. Like, wow. Whenever I think about that, it still gives me chills and I can't believe it. At that time, I thought I was crazy. I had a long day. I was tired and I just wanted to, relax. But God used that moment to turn around some things in my life. It turned out to be so true that statement that I just said was the beginning to my journey of healing. You may be thinking right now, why is this girl airing out all her business like that on a chapel stage? Or, dude, that sucks, but what am I supposed to do with that? I'm so glad you asked. Because I want to give you a few things that I learned as I went on this journey to self-healing. And I hope that this may be able to help some of you that are going through it right now. So before I get into the practical steps that I learned as I was going through this journey to healing, we have to kind of talk about what grief is, So when I talk about grief, I'm talking about this definition. Grief is the response to loss, particularly the loss of someone or something to which a bond or affection was formed. Although conventionally focused on the emotional response to grief, grief also has physical, cognitive, behavioral, cultural, spiritual, and philosophical dimensions. Something that I want to highlight from that specific definition, is that there are many different aspects to grief. There are physical, cognitive, behavioral, social, cultural, spiritual, and philosophical dimensions. When you are grieving, you can experience one or all of these things. For me specifically, I struggled with the spiritual dimension, but not for the reason that you may think. I wasn't angry at God for taking away my grandmother. She was in pain for many years, and I was so happy that she no longer had to be confined to a flesh that trapped her in that pain. I wasn't upset at God that he didn't give me a boyfriend. I wasn't angry at God that I didn't get that internship. And I wasn't angry at God because he didn't give me the position that I worked so hard for. What I was angry about and what I struggled with was the emptiness that my grandmother's death, the singleness, and the internship, among other things, left me. I always thought, how can I be so empty when I have the greatest book that the world has ever seen at my disposal? Like how? How is that even possible? All I had to do was open it. There's so many different verses, books, characters in the Bible that were going through the same thing that I was going through, but why was I stuck? I refused to be one of those people that talked back to God and questioned him. And I think that was a huge reason why I struggled so hard. And I was in a denial so deep that I couldn't get myself out to actually take the time to ask those questions. Why am I this way? Why am I stuck? Why can't I open up the Word of God? Why? but I had all of that wrong. I think that something that we as Christians forget is that God is not so far away. Rather than he is right next to us. God is our Father. He loves us through our struggles. And rather than admitting that we are empty and struggling, we pretend that everything is okay. And we continue on with this facade because we don't want other people to know that we're struggling with our faith. Because when we have the courage to open up about it, we feel that instant shame and we share it. And when we share it with some of our friends, their instant response is, wow, you're going through a lot. I'll be praying for you. Which, don't get me wrong, that's great. That's a great response to have. But I always thought, what am I supposed to do in the meantime? I still feel stuck. I still have this weight on me. Well, here's that next step, and here's my first tip about the journey to healing. Admit it. The first step in any true healing is to admit that you're going through something. And contrary to belief, it's okay to acknowledge that you're having a hard time. Call out to God and know that because you cry out or you're struggling doesn't mean that God has left you or is mad at you, because he has a love like no other. And nothing, and I mean nothing, that we do can or will ever change that. I really had to admit that I was going through a hard time, and it was simply because I hid it well. I don't know if that was the Enneagram 4 in me or if I was just stubborn like my mother and my grandmother, that I had to allow myself to acknowledge that I was going through a hard time. This is because I constantly told myself that I shouldn't be sad or upset that I was the only person in my friend group that wasn't in a relationship or getting married. Like, there are bigger problems in the world than my relationship status on Facebook. There are. Or that I didn't get the internship. Another thing that I kept telling myself was that people die all the time, and that's a part of life, and that the small amount of time that I gave myself to grieve was enough, but it wasn't. There's not a time limit on grieving or healing, and don't let anyone else tell you anything different. So give yourself the space to realize that it is okay to not be okay. Psalms 34:17-18 says, The righteous cry out, and the Lord hears them. He delivers them from all of their troubles. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. So know that God hears you, and he wants to be close to you with him in all your troubled times. That even if you feel stuck and you can't seem to get unstuck, just know that God is there waiting for you when you do get unstuck. My next point is to be honest with yourself. You, out of everyone that is on this earth, is the only person to know what you are feeling, and you owe it to yourself to be honest. Now, I'm going to just make a generalization here, but I think I can confidently say that no one likes to be lied to. Correct me if I'm wrong, but no one likes to be lied to. So why are you doing it to yourself? Why are you allowing yourself to lie to yourself? When you're having a bad day, acknowledge that. Find something that makes you feel better. So if that's going for a walk, go for a walk. If that's reading a book, read a book. If that's going to Dairy Queen and get it and using that buy one, get one free Blizzard on that coupon and eating both of them, go do it and eat both of them and feel no shame in that. Because no one's going to judge you. That's what makes you feel better, so do it. And sometimes in that aspect of being honest to yourself, sometimes it means crying it out. Girls, it doesn't make you overly emotional when you have to take those 5 to 10 minutes in the bathroom stall and crying it out. Same thing with guys. It doesn't make you look sissy. It doesn't make you look less of a man. It makes you human. God gave us emotions for a reason. He didn't give them to us to bottle them up inside of us. So cry. There's nothing wrong with that. Which leads me to my next point. Surround yourself with good people. Another thing that comes with being honest to yourself is being honest with those that are around you. When you're having a hard time, don't just say I'm fine, because you're not. When you're having a hard time, don't just say I'm fine. Be honest and say, I'm not doing so great, but I'm working through it. Or say, I'm not doing so hot, but when I'm ready, I'll talk about it. If they truly care about you, they will support you in the way that you need. Here's an example. My roommate, not Avery, we still love Avery though. My roommate that I've had for all 4 years of undergrad had this little prayer sticky wall next to her bed. And her bed was lofted, so I couldn't see unless you were actually like up on her bed. But one day, on a day that I had a hard day, I had woken up from a nap and saw that that one of her little sticky notes had fallen onto my pillow and it had my name on it. I didn't ask her to pray for me. I had rarely talked about the pain that I was going through. She was one of the first people I called when my grandmother did pass away. But outside of that, I hadn't really talked about it. Some other thing that she would do was write little encouraging notes on gum wrappers. Why gum wrappers? I don't really know. But it was the thought that counted. And when I did open up about it, she didn't ask any, or she just listened. And she only asked clarifying questions because I'm known to talk without a breath in between sentences. Now, I'm not saying that if your friends don't do that, they don't love or care for you. But the people that want to help you heal will find ways to show that they care for you and will ask you what you need. My fourth point is move forward even through the pain. True healing hurts. It doesn't matter if you're getting over the loss of a family member, a boyfriend or girlfriend, or even a friendship, or even a traumatic event that happened in your life. I'm not going to lie to you, there will be hard days through this process. Days where you just want to sit in your bed and cry, and I want to say specifically to the men again in the room, that it's okay to cry. I know that toxic masculinity is a thing, but honestly, you are more of a man if you express your emotions that are hurting you. I encourage you to do it. I encourage you to cry. I encourage you to go to Dairy Queen, read a book, or go for a walk. But I also encourage you to pick yourself back up again and move forward. A common saying in my family is that God will not give you more than you can handle, which is true, but I want to one-up that just a little bit. Sorry, family, I know you're watching. And I'm going to give you 2 Corinthians 1:8-9, and that says, "We do not want you to be uninformed about the troubles we experience. We are under great pressure, far beyond our ability to endure, so that we despaired our life itself. But this happened that we might not rely on ourselves, but on a God who raises the dead." Here, Paul is talking to the Corinthian church, but I think that this can be applied here in saying that there are times where you will want to give up. Times where you feel like you have nothing else to give, but in those times, don't rely on your strength, but rely on the strength of a God who raises the dead. My fifth and last point is good can come out of this. If I didn't experience all of those things my senior year, I know that I would not be here right now. And if you would have told me a year ago that I would still be at Grace, I would have chuckled, and because I had strong plans to move to either Chicago to live with my best friend or to Indianapolis to start my career in publishing. But if I didn't experience those things, if I didn't experience all that hurt and loss, I wouldn't have applied for the ARD job. I wouldn't have met these amazing people in the Res Life team or my amazing RAs and the residents that live on their hall. I wouldn't have been able to accomplish a lifetime dream of mine to become a volleyball coach. I would not be on this stage right now. Now, I'm not saying that my life now is rainbows and butterflies, because it's not. I still have my issues that I need to work through, but if that season of my life has taught me anything, it's that God has you right where He wants you to be, and it's all a part of your journey. I'm going to close this out in prayer, and then I'm going to invite Brent back up on the stage. Dear Lord, first, I just thank you for this opportunity to come share my story and speak to your people. Lord, I just pray for anyone that may be going through a hard time right now. Lord, I just pray that those that are grieving will know that you are still next to them, know that you have never left them. Lord, I pray for those people, and I pray that they reach out their hand to you, and not only to you, but to people who can help them get through the grief that they are experiencing. Lord, we love you, we thank you, and we pray all this in your name. Amen.
Thanks, Maya. All right, so Maya shared a testimony with us about grief. And we want to give you all the opportunity this morning to be able to acknowledge grief that you've experienced in your life. As Maya acknowledged, it's been a really, really difficult year. And you may actually be sick of hearing that. And I think part of the reason we get sick of hearing things like that is because there's a temptation to only think about or speak about grief generally. But that's not what Maya did for us this morning. She shared with us specifically about pain and grief that she's experienced. And she did that because our God doesn't handle or work with us on our grief just generally. He works with us in our pain specifically. So when we leave this chapel, I know life is going to get busy. It's going to be moving. You're going to have assignments and things that are going to distract you. So for just a little bit of time here, I want us to pause and to really consider what Maya shared and give ourselves the same opportunity to acknowledge pain and grief that we've experienced over the past year. So I'm gonna invite you, I'm gonna challenge you to spend the next 2 minutes in silence. Not talking to the people around you, not distracted by things going on, to try not to be distracted by your phone, to take this little bit of time. We often don't just stop and give ourselves more time to consider something like this, to take 2 minutes of silence and to acknowledge grief or pain that you've experienced over the past year. So after those 2 minutes, I'll come back up and give you a couple more opportunities here before we're done. So let's take 2 minutes of silence and give yourself the opportunity to acknowledge grief, to acknowledge pain before the Lord. All right, I'm gonna challenge you to take it one step farther. I'm gonna challenge you to turn to someone near you and share one thing that's been difficult this year. Turn to someone next to you, share what's been difficult one thing that's been difficult, something that you've been grieved by, I'm going to ask you to pray for one another in that grief. And I'm going to ask you to do what Maia was asking us to do, and that is to commit to trusting Jesus with our pain, our grief, and allowing him to see us through it. So turn to someone near you, share something that you were acknowledging there, pray for one another, and then I'll come back up here in just a couple of minutes, maybe 3-4 minutes, and I'll dismiss us. All right, I'm going to call your attention back here to the stage. We know that our God does not promise to protect us or keep us from pain, but we do know that he promises to be with us throughout anything and everything that we experience. So Let me pray for all of us, and then we will be dismissed. Father, thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning. We thank you for Maia and the challenge that she shared with us, the willingness that she has to be vulnerable. And I'm thankful for the many voices I heard in sharing in this room. I pray for all of the pain, the grief that we've all felt, that you would be near to us in the midst of it. Help us to learn to trust you, to not look to control our own circumstances when we feel pain or to react in fear, but help us to trust you, to see us through it. And I pray that we would feel peace that only you can give, and that our love would grow deeper for you as we work through the pain and grief that we're facing. Be with us this day, and I pray for a wonderful rest of this semester. I pray this all in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, you're dismissed. Thank you.